Russia has used an ICBM for the first time, Russia's final warning before resorting to nuclear weapons. A fresh report. Greetings, dear friends. Here, we analyze the situation at the front daily, review and study maps of advances, and draw conclusions and forecasts for the future. Today, we'll discuss the Russian flag raised in the center of Kurakhove, significant breakthroughs in several areas, quite substantial in terms of distance, towards Velyka Novasilka, and the situation involving the arrest of commanders in the Siversk direction. Now let's move on to the maps. Yesterday, if you watched my report, you might remember I talked about the Russian army's airborne operation. The landing started from Stepankivka here, advancing towards the center of Kurakhove, specifically towards the area near the grain elevator. Once they secured this position, they began expanding their success further, including advancing towards the high-rise area here, where the main forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, AFU, are concentrated. By evening yesterday, data from Objective Control became available, confirming that the Russian flag had been raised in the center of Kurakhove. The flag was hoisted here, on this building. Progress in Kurakhove. Here's how the situation unfolded next. Moving beyond the grain elevator, the 114th Guards Unit advanced to the high-rise area. During yesterday's battles, 3 5-story buildings were captured. Fighting continues today, and results will become known later. Breakthrough near Velyka Novasilka. The situation south of Kurakhove near Velyka Novasilka is also developing dynamically. The front line of the AFU is collapsing, not just a bold claim, but a reality. Yesterday, the Russian army launched a strong offensive in this area, achieving significant breakthroughs nearly everywhere and pushing the front line back significantly. Look here at the village of Rozdolny. Just yesterday, Russian units were positioned here. During their offensive, they advanced about 3 kilometers, entered the village itself, and secured the outermost houses. Rozdolny is a small village, so it's likely that storming operations will continue today, and the settlement might fully come under Russian control soon. Strategic goals. The logical next step would be to move towards the settlement of Novi Komar. If Russian units reach and capture it, the Velyka Novasilka group of the AFU will be operationally encircled. Their current situation is already nearing catastrophe. From Rozdolny to the supply route of the AFU grouping in the urban-type settlement is just 2 kilometers. With Russian forces now in Rozdolny, the road is already under heavy fire control. If they advance towards Novi Komar, it will be physically cut off, halting northern logistics and troop rotations. Another road through Novokomarska to the urban settlement would also be neutralized if Russian forces take control there. Moreover, from Rozdolny to Velyka Novasilka, it's just 2 kilometers via a direct route. Clearly, the overall objective is becoming apparent. Advances from Novodonetsk. On this same axis, but slightly south, the Russian army has also completed a significant advance. From the settlement of Novodonetsk, they progressed about 4 kilometers towards Velyka Novasilka. Parallel strikes can be expected here, likely along this road leading to Velyka Novasilka. General strategy. If we combine all these advancements, the General Staff's overall strategy becomes clear. To encircle Velyka Novasilka, trapping the enemy forces in a pocket or forcing them to retreat. The Siversk direction. Lastly, let's talk about the Siversk direction. Here the map advances are less significant, though the front line is becoming more active. What's important is the situation with the local command. The Russian Siversk grouping has long been problematic. Reports of capturing Bilohorivka and Serebryanka were falsified. They were never fully controlled. The local command sent soldiers on assaults without air or artillery support, leading to high casualties. Why weren't air and artillery used? Because when you falsely claim that Bilohorivka is under your control, you can't request airstrikes or artillery on it. Otherwise, you'd be bombing your own positions. As a result, neither air power nor artillery was deployed effectively, and the troops suffered heavy and unnecessary losses. Assault groups were sent forward only to come under artillery fire from the opposing side and perish. The result? Endless meat assaults and constant losses. With no progress, barely 100 meters could be gained. Eventually, high-ranking command recently arrived in this area and decided to visit Bilohorivka and Serebryanka. But how could they do so when those territories are under Ukrainian control unless they surrendered as prisoners? The outcome was that heads rolled. 3 brigade commanders were dismissed and arrested. Most significantly, the deputy commander of the entire grouping in the Siversk direction was removed, a very serious development indicating that some conclusions had been drawn. Thus, the command for this direction in the Russian forces has been changed. Naturally, the new leadership will want to demonstrate results, so we should closely monitor this direction. An escalation is likely to occur here in the near future. Now let's discuss the most significant event of November 21st. Overnight, Russia carried out a strike on Dnipro with something quite unusual. The missile strike on Dnipro is currently the main news of the day. It's no joke, this was the first combat use of an ICBM. I would call it the event of the year, and hence the uproar. It's clearly no coincidence that today, at a briefing, Maria Zakharova, breaking all protocol, answered a phone call mid-briefing, allowing everyone to hear. No need to comment on the strike. This was a hint, and a very transparent one at that. What could come next? What threats can we pose to the enemy? How many of these missiles can we launch at them? It's clear that we won't be using nuclear weapons against Ukraine, but today demonstrated that we can deploy our ICBMs equipped with conventional warheads. And this changes everything. The missile strike on Dnipro. Why the Rubezh and not the Topol? We've determined that today's strike was our response to NATO's long-range missile attacks on the Bryansk and Kursk regions. This strike carried a message. What's the message? That we've shown how we'll respond if Kyiv continues its strikes with Storm Shadows and Attack MS. The key now is understanding our actual capability to carry out similar strikes in the future. Let's start with this. Even before today's strike, the enemy had publicly speculated that Russia was preparing to launch an ICBM, specifically from the Kapustin Yar test site. Why are they convinced it was an RS-26? Likely because NATO satellites detected some activity around the appropriate hangars at Kapustin Yar. This led to interpretations by Zelensky and his associates. But could they have confused it with something else? They certainly could have, especially without clear images of the launcher itself. And that was likely the case. Mobile launchers for the RS-12M Topol and RS-26 Rubezh look very similar and could easily be stored in the same hangar. This means that today's strike might not have been carried out by the Rubezh missile, but rather by the Topol. Why is this significant? The most expensive component of such weapons is the missile itself. Russia cannot produce them in large quantities. It's technically challenging and, above all, expensive. The RS-26 is a new missile, and scaling up its production is an extremely costly endeavor. Additionally, this would divert resources from manufacturing systems like the Avangard, which are currently being deployed in our strategic missile forces. But we have plenty of Topols, and not just them. What's more, we're not particularly worried about using them. This means that these strikes cost us about as much as it costs the US to supply weapons to Kyiv, perhaps even less. And for us, delivery is free. Let me point something out first. Experts will know this, but not everyone does. The US and its partners mainly supply Kyiv with outdated equipment that they either decommissioned long ago or are removing from service right now. Back to today's strike. Each year, we decommission ICBMs that have reached the end of their service life. These missiles are usually still operational, but over the past 20 to 25 years, we've developed better systems, so the older ones are retired. These retired missiles are either dismantled and disposed of or repurposed, for example, to launch satellites into orbit. The Topol missile, for instance, was used in this capacity 7 times between 1993 and 2006. This is much cheaper than using other launch vehicles since the missile is already built and only needs to be adapted for a new payload. However, we have a surplus of missiles and very few orders for such launches, especially now with the West, our primary customer for commercial launches, imposing a blockade. As a result, most of these missiles are simply destroyed over time, a new use for old missiles. Today's launch demonstrated that we have non-nuclear warheads suitable for Topol missiles. These missiles can be used to strike Ukrainian territory. and the Topol's warhead capacity is 1,200 kilograms, which is substantial. Moreover, since we don't need to fire at maximum range, we could equip the Topol with an even larger warhead under its fairing, potentially up to 1,500 or even 2,000 kilograms. This changes everything. A 1,500 kilogram warhead is equivalent to 3 Iskander warheads, and a 2,000 kilogram warhead equals 4. This makes the missile exponentially more powerful. It also travels at much higher speeds, creating even greater destructive force upon impact. Enemy air defenses cannot intercept them. They're simply incapable. We still have at least a dozen Topol launchers, which means we can fire these missiles in salvos. Possible targets: strategic bridges across the Dnipro, the Yuzhmash plant in Dnipro, the Malishev factory in Kharkiv, the port of Odessa. There are plenty of options. As for the missiles themselves, we produced a total of 369 Topols. Some have been used, some scrapped, but the last ones were retired from active service only this summer. I'm confident we still have 150 to 200 in storage. Moreover, starting in 2025, we will begin retiring upgraded Topol-M missiles. We currently have 78 launchers for these missiles, 60 in silos and 18 mobile. The exact number of missiles produced is unknown, but it's certainly higher. All of these missiles are scheduled for decommissioning and destruction in the coming years. But they could be put to use instead, just as we did today against Dnipro's Yuzhmash. The message is clear. This is not just a hint, but a strong incentive for the enemy to rethink its actions. Today we've proven that we're prepared for such strikes and will carry them out when necessary. The ball is now in the enemy's court, and their backers' court too. PS, based on available footage, 6 missiles with 6 smaller warheads each struck Yuzhmash. This suggests the missiles used might have been Topol-Ms, as they are configured to carry either 3 or 6 smaller warheads.